Hey guys, it's Vicky, and today I'm here to share with you my February wrap-up part 1. I have already read 5 books this month, and it's only like the middle of the month, so I decided to split my wrap-up up into 2 wrap-ups so that I don't have a big, huge, long wrap-up at the end, because that just sounds very daunting to me. So I'm going to go ahead and share those books with you now. So the first book that I completed in February was, and I have to read the subtitle because I will never remember it, Never Home Alone, From Microbes to Millipedes, Camel Crickets and Honeybees, The Natural History of Where We Live by Rob Dunn. I got this one from the library, so I had to return it. And it is a nonfiction book that I had started back in January. And it is this fascinating look at the biodiversity inside of our homes. Like the title suggests, it talks about not only like bacteria and like the little tiny things, but also things like fungi and little critters like spiders and German cockroaches and camel crickets, and how these things all kind of affect our lives. And basically, the gist of the book is that we need to reintroduce biodiversity into our homes because those things, though they are often viewed as creepy, and we have this kind of fear and this need to get rid of those things in our homes, they are actually very beneficial to our health. Specifically, and I found this super fascinating, there have been studies done that the more biodiversity you have in your home, so the more kind of like things you let in from the outside, things like soil particles and obviously little critters and things like that, the less likely you are to have inflammatory conditions like asthma and allergies and things like that, that the more you are around those things, the better it is for your health. And I just found that to be completely fascinating. And he even goes on to explain how things like spiders and cockroaches are also beneficial to us humans, which again, you're like, ah! So it's kind of scary, but it's also like super interesting. And it basically is just a push to, like I said, reintroduce biodiversity into your home. Stop worrying about killing everything, because a lot of times, like when you're bleaching everything, you're killing everything and leaving the really, really bad stuff. Because the really, really bad stuff can even like outlive a lot of those like harsh cleansers and stuff that we use. And he talks about opening your windows more often, letting in the fresh air, trying to keep more plants, different kinds of plants and trees and things in your backyard, just stuff like that. And it was just super fascinating, and I really enjoyed it. So I think if any of you out there are really into nonfiction books like that have kind of a scientific slant to them, definitely give this one a shot because it's really interesting and I think you will learn a lot. And I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. Next up, Leia and I completed Charlotte's Web by E.B. White. This is a children's classic that I hadn't read since I was a child, and Leia really wanted me to read her a chapter book, and so this one I had it on my shelves and I thought that she would like it, and she did. And I really enjoyed reading this with my daughter. I was really worried that she wouldn't stay engaged, or that she would get bored, or that she wouldn't understand some of the themes, but I feel like she really did connect to the story, even though she's 4, and she really ended up enjoying it, and so did I. This is about a pig named Wilbur who befriends a spider named Charlotte, and yeah, it just is about their friendship. And so obviously themes of friendship are huge in this book, about kindness and doing things for the sake of kindness, not necessarily because you feel like you're going to get something in return. And yes, it does also deal with death a little bit, which is a topic that I think, I know my daughter being 4, she has this kind of new fascination, not fascination, but this new curiosity about death. And this book was definitely a story I think that kind of helped to bring a little bit of understanding to death a little bit. It's not that she has experienced death personally, but just like watching movies and stuff when people die, or when she hears about that someone died, she just is very curious about it. So this kind of helped to introduce the topic, and yeah, this story now is going to have like a whole new kind of sentimental feeling for me because it's the first chapter book that we read together and we both really loved it. So 5 out of 5 stars. And obviously, like, if you haven't read Charlotte's Web, you probably should because it is a children's classic for a reason. It's written very well and has some very like basic themes, but themes that obviously children can relate to. So next up, I completed the audiobook of The Great Alone by Kristen Hanna. And this was my second Kristen Hanna. Last month in January, I read The Nightingale, loved it, was a 5-star read, so I was super excited to get into The Great Alone, which is her latest release. And this was a huge book last year, so I've heard a lot of people talking about it. There's been a lot of buzz, and I feel like the buzz was justified. This book is about a family, husband and wife and their teenage daughter, and they moved to Alaska, this very rural part of Alaska, and it takes place in the 1970s, and they kind of moved there to just get away from it all. The dad is a Vietnam veteran, and he's dealing with a lot of anger issues and just a lot of demons having to do with the war, and he just really wants to go off the grid and stuff. And so the family, it goes with very high expectations of, you know, bettering their life, and they find very quickly that Alaska, though beautiful, is also a very difficult place to live, especially as you get into the winter period. It's very bleak and very dark and very dangerous. And it was interesting because as the book progressed and you saw the weather change, you also saw a change in the family. This darkness also was reflected in the family and their relationship, and it was really well written, and I loved the setting. Alaska sounds like a fabulous place, but not a place I ever want to live personally, but it was such a part of the story, and it was like it was a character in the story, because Kristen Hanna just wrote it so well, and it was just a really good story. It took a lot of turns that I didn't think it was going to take. It tugged on my heartstrings, which I was kind of expecting, because I hear now that Kristen Hanna, that's like her thing. And yeah, it was a really good book with some interesting characters, good story, and I really enjoyed it. So I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. I would definitely recommend the audiobook. The audio narrator, I believe her name is Julia Whalen. I think that's her name. She also did the audiobook for Educated by Tara Westover, and I loved that audiobook as well. So I would definitely recommend it because she's a really good audiobook narrator. So yeah, definitely check that one out if you haven't. So my next February read was I'm Thinking of Ending Things by Ian Reid. And wow, this book was one of those books that messes with your brain. Like, it's one of those books that you kind of spend a huge chunk of it, like, talking to it, yelling at it, maybe. I don't know if anybody else does this. I spent a lot of this book going, what? What is going on? What? Huh? Like, that was me, like, throughout the entire book. Because it's so... You're so in the dark about what's going on, and you think you have a grasp of what's going on, and then you find out that you don't. The gist of the story is that this girl is riding in the car with her boyfriend. They are on their way to visit his family, and they live on this rural farm. And she is on this ride, and she is thinking to herself that she wants to end the relationship. She's thinking of ending things. And she kind of slowly gives you little instances of why. There's like some back and forth in time kind of going on and stuff like that. And then at about the halfway point, the book just starts getting really, really weird and really creepy. And you are, as a reader, you are totally uncomfortable when you're reading the book. Like, and you're not sure why. You just feel completely unsettled. And yeah. And then things just get progressively more weird. And by the time you read the last sentence, like, I was reading it on my Kindle, so I read the last sentence, and when I clicked to the next page and it was the acknowledgement page, I was like, huh? What? That's the end? And I wanted to go back and read it again because I felt like a second read through would have been super beneficial. So I'm thinking about maybe doing that, about maybe rereading it sometime, because now that I have read it once, maybe I will go into it with a better understanding, because it was good. I think what made it good was the feeling it gave you. It was very tense. I've heard so many people describe this book as tense, and it really is. And that's what makes it so good, is the way it makes you feel, the way you are uncomfortable, and the way that it, like I said, messes with your mind. I'm really interested to read more of Ian Reid's books. I've heard that his other book, Foe, is also kind of weird. And I liked it. It was one of those books that it makes you think, it's confusing, but when you're done with it, you're like, wow, that was kind of brilliant. So yes, I don't want to say much more about like the themes that the book explores or anything, because I feel like it would be spoilery. Just go and pick the book up and read it, and then come back and talk to me, because I would still love to chat with people about this book, because it was something else. But I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. And then the last book that I'm going to talk about in this wrap-up is The Life-Changing Magic of Tidying Up by Marie Kondo. Like a lot of people right now, I watched Tidying Up on Netflix, and so I got kind of interested in the KonMari method of organizing. So I picked up this book because I wanted to just kind of get more in-depth information about this whole method. And I did find things about the book to be helpful, especially things about like using common things to use as storage, like shoe boxes and things like that. How she folds clothes, I find to be super effective. I've actually done my clothes that way, and it makes so much sense. Then there were things, though, that I felt were a little bit kooky. I want to say kooky. Let me give you an example. In the clothing part of the book, because she kind of separates it, when she's talking about clothing, she talks about how you should roll your socks. And she says that you should roll your socks and not fold them. You know how like you put them together and then you fold them over? She says you shouldn't do that because your socks work so hard on your feet all day, and then that's how you treat them, that you ball them up like that. That's just not nice. That, you know, you should roll them and be gentle because they're socks. And I'm thinking, they're socks. And then I was like, okay, all right, because she definitely, that's like a theme throughout, is that, you know, you should treat your objects as if they do have feelings. And I get that. But then, in the next section, when she's talking about books, she talks about how she got rid of 40 books from her collection. And what she did was, when she was trying to decide which ones to keep and stuff, and she was conflicted about them, it was mostly because there were just certain passages in the books that she really liked and wanted to kind of have access to. So what does she do? She rips the page out of the book and puts it in a notebook or in a folder or something. And I'm like, wait a second. We can't ball up our socks because that hurts their feelings, but you can tear a page out of a book? It did not seem to fit her whole objects have feelings kind of thing. And also it kind of was like, I didn't really like it, was that because once you do that to a book, it's completely useless. You can't donate it or pass it on to someone else because you ripped a page out of it. Like, if you don't want the book, that's fine, get rid of the book, but keep it intact and give it to somebody who might like the book. So there were just things about it that, like I said, I found useful, and then there were things that I just, to me, just didn't seem practical. One more example I'll give, and then I'm done. She mentions in your bathroom every day taking the shampoos and stuff out and putting them somewhere else. Like every day, take them out and dry them off and put them somewhere else, because then when you go to clean the shower, it's already empty and you don't have to take everything out. But I'm like, maybe I'm just lazy, but I just don't feel like that's something I'm going to start practicing ever. So I would say there are definitely benefits to this method. I like how she organizes things not by room in terms of organizing, but by category. I think that's really smart to do, you know, to do clothing, and then to do, you know, books, and then to do all your paperwork, you know, and all that. I like that part of it. And like I said, some of the ways in which she organizes things by using, you know, boxes and different things, awesome. But when she gets down into some of the, like the nitty-gritty of, like, objects have feelings and stuff like that, I was kind of it felt a little bit too kooky to me, to be quite honest. So definitely, like, if you're interested in the KonMari method, you should definitely pick this book up and read it because it will give you a lot of information. But for me, it was kind of hit or miss. It was kind of hit and miss. So I gave the book 3 out of 5 stars. Alright guys, so that is my February wrap-up part 1. I will be back at the end of the month with the rest of my books. I'm thinking I'm going to finish at least 3, if not 4 more books by the end of the month. So February is turning out to be quite a month for me. Right now I'm in the middle of listening to Horns by Joe Hill on audio and loving that story. I'm also reading Made by Stephanie Land. Is it Stephanie? Yes, Stephanie Land, nonfiction memoir, which I am enjoying. And I'm also reading Anne of Windy Poplars by Ella Montgomery. And that one I'm conflicted about. I'm going to finish it, but it's not my favorite so far. So those are the books that I'm reading right now, and I might try to squeeze in one more after that before the end of the month. So please let me know down below how February is treating you. Have you completed any books? What have you been reading? I would love to hear about it. But other than that, I hope that you guys are having a wonderful week, and I will talk to you very soon. Thank you so much for watching. Bye.